What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2021 schedule previews and projected records. TCU is up next. TCU was a very sneaky 6-4 last season. I don't know if a lot of people realize that this team actually had a winning record in the Big 12. Of course, had that big win over Texas. I think a lot of people do remember that win. But they got to play every team in the Big 12. Played an entire 10-game schedule. Played every Big 12 opponent. They did not get to play SMU, but they were able to get a kind of a makeup game with a non-conference opponent and playing Louisiana Tech there at the end of the season. So for TCU, wound up being a pretty good year, getting to play 10 games, winning record in the Big 12. And unfortunately, they didn't get to play their bowl game. That was one I was really looking forward to, TCU and Arkansas in the Texas Bowl, but we did not get to see that matchup. Well, let's look ahead now to 2021, and this is the schedule. Again, they were 6-4 last season. They will open up on September the 4th against Duquesne, FCS team. Obviously, that should be an easy win. Then they'll play Cal on September 11th. I think they were supposed to play last year, maybe. So that'll be a good non-conference matchup there. Cal was disappointing last season, but I wouldn't overlook that game. I think that'll be a pretty tough game there for TCU. Then they'll get a bye week. So their bye week is really early in the year, which is kind of strange. But they will get a bye week before playing SMU. Just talked about that a minute ago. They didn't get to play last year. This year they will play, and it'll be great to see that matchup back in 2021. After that, it'll be all Big 12 opponents, and it'll be no bye weeks because their bye week's so early. They're going to play 9 straight weeks of Big 12 football, and if you go back to SMU, it'll be 10 straight weeks on this schedule. So Texas comes up on October the 2nd, home game for TCU. Can they duplicate what they did last year? We shall see. Texas Tech on the road on October the 9th. Texas Tech is a team that is interesting this year. I think I don't really see them challenging for the top half of the Big 12, but I think they'll be a solid team. Oklahoma there on October 16th on the road. That'll be a tough matchup. Of course, Oklahoma is absolutely loaded this year. West Virginia on October 23rd. That'll be a home game for the Horned Frogs. That'll be a big game there. Kansas State on October the 30th. They will play them on the road. Then it'll be Baylor on November the 6th. Home game for TCU, followed up with Oklahoma State on the road on November 13th. Kansas is on November 20th, and then they will finish things out with Iowa State on the road November 27th. So, it's a pretty tough schedule. You've got to play Oklahoma and Iowa State on the road, plus Oklahoma State on the road. Those will be 3 tough matchups there. Good news is you get Texas and West Virginia at home. They have the back-to-back road games there with Texas Tech and Oklahoma. That stands out to me a little bit. That's the only back-to-back road games that they will face. Toughest stretch of the schedule might be Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kansas State. Maybe that's the toughest stretch for them. But just not having a bye week after that early bye week for them, that could prove to be a disadvantage. We'll see what happens. Maybe they get on a roll and they don't want to have a bye week. We'll see. TCU does have a lot of production coming back this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So this should be a pretty good team and a schedule that I don't think is brutal, but it's still a pretty tough schedule when you only have a couple of easy games, Duquesne and Kansas. You have Cal and SMU in the non-conference and some tough games on the road make for a pretty tough schedule for TCU in 2021. Now let's give you a projected record for the Horned Frogs, and I want to make it clear that this is not an official prediction. It's simply a projection based on the schedule. This is the scale that we use to do this. If it's a 50-50 game, it'll stay in the white. If it's a less than 10% game, it'll be in the red, 10 to 25% in orange, 26 to 40% in yellow, 60 to 74% in purple, 75 to 90% in blue. If it's over 90%, it'll be in the green, and that's where we will start. I think you have one of these games for TCU, and that's the FCS opponent, Duquesne. I think there's really no reason to think TCU would have any trouble in that matchup. So that's the easy win, the one pretty much a guaranteed win on the schedule. I think you have another one that's close to being in the green, but we're going to put them in the blue just because it is a conference opponent, and that is Kansas. Kansas continues to be really the worst team in the Big 12. Now Les Miles is gone. This program just has absolutely nothing going for them right now, and there's no reason to expect them to be competitive at all in the Big 12. So yes, TCU should be able to win that game. They'll be favored by double digits for sure. So you got two easy wins, we'll say. One that I think is pretty much guaranteed. Kansas not far from that. I would put them close to 90%. And then you have the rest of the schedule here where every other game is going to be a game that TCU could win or they could lose. I mean, it wouldn't be a stretch to see them win or lose any of these other 10 games. We're going to start with for the rest of the schedule here, we're going to start with the purple. We're going to talk about the games that they will be favored in, but we're not talking about a big favorite, maybe 6, 7, 8 points somewhere in there. I think you've got about 4 of these games. I think Cal and SMU non-conference games, because they're at home, because of the production that TCU does return, because Cal struggled last year, because SMU loses a ton of production. I think that both of those games are games that TCU will be favored in, but not games that they're not anywhere near a guaranteed win. They will be tough matchups and probably 4-quarter games. Texas Tech, another game that I think can be in this category, and then Baylor as well. And when we kind of put the Big 12 in tiers, Kansas is at the bottom of the Big 12. Kansas by themselves. But then the tier above them is kind of Baylor and Texas Tech. And then you got a bunch of teams in the middle, and then you have Iowa State and Oklahoma at the top. So, again, I think TCU is in a tier just above Texas Tech and Baylor. That's why those games are in the purple. How about the games where they'll be underdogs? I think clear underdogs. And we just talked about the tiers. I think because these teams are in a tier above TCU, you put Oklahoma and Iowa State in this yellow category, 26 to 40%. Both games probably closer to 26% than they are 40, just because they're on the road. And again, we're talking about top 10 teams. It'll be very tough for TCU to win either one of these games, but they'll have a chance. I think they'll have a chance to be competitive in both of these matchups. But again, very tough ones. Iowa State and Oklahoma, and having to play both of them on the road, that makes for a very tough couple of matchups there. Remember, they played Iowa State really tough last year. Only lost by 3 points, but Oklahoma, that game really wasn't all that close. So, again, when we put these games in these percentages, every game is not the same. 26 to 40%. I know that's a big range, and I know that, like I said, both of these games are probably closer to 26%, but I do think they belong in this category. And the rest of the schedule, it's really 50-50 games. And I talked about the group of teams in that middle tier of the Big 12. These are those teams: Texas, West Virginia, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and then put TCU in there as well. Those 5 teams for me are really in that middle tier of the Big 12. All these teams have a chance to have really good years, but it's not going to be a guarantee. So, again, these games could go either way. I think the spread for all of these games will be very low, 3 or 4 points, or less than that maybe. You're talking about Texas and West Virginia at home, Kansas State and Oklahoma State on the road. This is the schedule right here. This is where you're going to find out about TCU. If they win all 4 of these games, they're going to have a great year. Even if they don't beat Oklahoma and Iowa State, they're going to have a great year if they win these games. If they lose 3 of these games, it's going to be a disappointing season. But what we do for the projected record here is we take the blue and the green, and we count those games as wins. We also would count the orange and red, but there are none here for TCU. And then we average the other games out. So we use 40% for yellow, 50% for white, 60% for purple. And again, all of these games are not the same. Cal, SMU, Texas Tech, Baylor, those games are not all the same. Texas Tech's probably closer to 60%, whereas Baylor might be closer to 74% because it's a home game. But it's just kind of a formula that I use to give you a rough projection, a very conservative approach to this. But when you do that for TCU, the projection comes out to be 7-5. So 7-5, the projected record for TCU, not a prediction, just a projection based off of this schedule. And when you give them the projection, they come out to 7-5, which I think is very reasonable. I think they could get to 8-4, maybe 9-3, but they could also be 6-6. So this is kind of in the middle here, and that's really what we're trying to do. So projected record for TCU in 2021 is 7-5. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.